order the City Council meeting for the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for October the 26th, 2020. In a moment, you will see the American flag on the screen. When you do, if you'd please stand as you are able and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Amanda Weaver.
Here.
Corey Stites.
Here.
Zachary Irvin.
Present.
Rachel Hulteen.
Present.
Valerie Nossler-Beck.
Present.
Judy Hutchinson.
Present.
Leah Dozeman.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, we have a quorum.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Hoppy is also here.
Okay. Thank you, Councilwoman Hobby, for being here. Thank you all. Thank all of you, councilors. In your packet, councilors, you have City Council minutes for October the 12th, 2020. If there are no objections, we will order these approved as presented. So ordered. If I do not hear any revisions to the agenda, we will let the agenda as presented stand. Ms. Hutchinson.
Sorry, Mayor. Yeah, I didn't get that in quick fast enough. Regarding the minutes, okay, from the meeting.
Yes.
Okay, I saw today on Wheat Ridge Speaks, there were some comments there regarding the petitions that or protests that have been filed. And actually, they weren't filed against the petition. The protests were filed in support of the sufficiency of the petitions. So I don't know if that can be looked at or not, but yeah, it wasn't.
Do you have a location in the minutes that we're talking about? I'm sorry, the page number?
I'm looking at the elected official matters from city clerk for the minutes, which were back to, I guess, October 12th.
Yes, and do you have a page number where this correction should be made on the minutes?
14.
Page 14.
Under elected officials matters.
Okay.
Page 16 of the document, 14 of the minutes.
Yeah. That's what I have. So.
What is your correction, Councilmember Hutchinson?
Pardon me?
What is your correction?
The correction is that it came out today on Wheat Ridge Speaks to clarify regarding what the protests were, and it stated they were against the recent petition. They weren't against the petition. They were filed in support of the sufficiency of the petition.
I shall change the minutes to reflect that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other proposed corrections? If we're going to make a correction, I will give you one more, Mr. Kirkpatrick. On page 2, the proclamation for Detective Patrick McDaniel, Mayor Starker expressed the city's sincere. Let's spell that CITY''S.
That would be good English. Yes, sir.
Okay. Are there any other corrections to the minutes? Okay, with those corrections, we will let the minutes stand as corrected. Thank you. All right. Unless I hear objection, we will let the agenda stand as presented. So ordered. We are now at our citizens' right to speak. Citizens may speak on any item not on the general agenda for 3 minutes. And we have a study session directly after this this city council meeting, and as in accordance with our council rules, we will take public comment on the study session item during our citizens' right to speak for that we're doing right now. So if you would like to speak on any item not on the agenda or any item that is on our study session, you may do so now. We have a 3-minute limit, and we had no one who signed up to speak at in the city council chambers. So we will be bringing you on through the Zoom platform that we're on now. If you would please raise your hand in the Zoom format. Our staff member, Ms. Scheck, thank you for being here, will bring speakers into our meeting. So, Ms. Scheck, do we have anyone now who would like to speak in Citizens' Right to Speak?
There we do. We're going to start off with a special presentation by Gene Myers with Thrive Home Builders, and you'll see him on the screen here. He's going to share his screen. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Myers, thank you for joining us tonight. I understand you have some exciting news for us.
Well, I'm trying to share my screen. Let's see if I'm not near as good at this as Allie. So,
Well, you've, as far as I can tell, you've got good success going. I see your screen.
good. Well, I just wanted to, first off, I thought this might be a first for a builder developer to show up at a council meeting and not be asking for anything. And I'm actually here tonight to thank you. We're building the Westridge Townhome Project, which is located just south of 44th on Yarrow. And you guys have really been an indispensable partner. You gave us the entitlements that we needed. You authorized a metropolitan district that made the project economically feasible. And then we work day by day with staff at the building department, the planning department, and others. And so the real purpose of this is to thank you for all of your help on this project. I'm gonna hop off this and move up to a different screen here. And this is, we have received some recognition for the project recently that I wanted to share with you. And this is the United States Department of Energy Housing Innovation Awards. And each year they recognize the best homes in America under those categories that are in bold. And we entered our Westridge project in the attached home category. And there were 3 finalists, and we were awarded the grand award. So at least as far as the DOE is concerned, these are the best townhomes in America. Here are just some really quick stats on the winning home. The only one here that I think bears some explanation is in the orange. HERS stands for the Home Energy Rating System. And typical existing home is about 130. Lower is better, by the way. A code-built home is typically these days in the mid-80s, and this home came in at a 29. And so what I love is this quote from a homeowner: "Having an energy-efficient home has helped so much with my monthly budget. I was paying 2 to 3 times the amount I am now in a smaller apartment." And then finally, we also received an EPA Indoor Air Plus Leader Award. And what the heck is that? Well, EPA Indoor Air Plus is a healthy home program. And I'll be honest with you, when we started this back in 2015, we kind of had to explain what the connection was between home and health. And we don't have to do that in our COVID world anymore. People get that connection. And we were one of 9 builders nationally awarded an EPA Indoor Plus Leader Award. Last year, we were their Builder of the Year. And but the point here of my presence is to thank you for being such a key part of the success of our project. We take very seriously our duty to build the best homes we can, and we think we're building some of the best homes in America right here in Wheat Ridge. You may remember our Perrins Row project at 38th and Depew. We also got a grand award for housing innovation in that project as well. So we've got a good run going. Let's get another project in Wheat Ridge and we'll bring home another grand award.
Okay. Mr. Meyer, thank you very much for bringing that to us tonight, and congratulations on a great looking project and the awards that you're winning with us. We look forward to having you build in our community. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Ms. Scheck, do we have other citizens with their hand up in the Zoom format?
No, Mayor, no one with their hand up.
Okay, let me ask if there's anyone on the telephone that would like to speak. You may do so now at our citizens' right to speak. Any item not on the agenda, happy to take comment. Just if you'll unmute yourself and speak up, we'll bring you into the meeting. Okay, once again, Ms. Scheck, I don't hear anyone. You don't see anyone on the Zoom format with their hand up?
Correct.
Okay, we will close our citizens' right to speak. And we will go to agenda item number 1. Ms. Hoppy, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item is resolution number 52-2020, a resolution adopting the city budget and appropriating sums of money to the various funds and spending agencies for the city of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for the 2021 budget year.
Okay, I think we have a staff presentation, so we will not read at issue, but go to Mr. Goff.
Thank you, sir. Just pulling up my presentation here.
While he's doing that, I'll bet you could open the public hearing.
Oh, thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Dahl. I will open the public hearing at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mayor, Council. Everybody see the presentation?
Yes.
Great.
I see my kids.
You can see, okay, should we just hang on there for a while?
They're being good in that photo.
Let me just get situated here so I can advance my slides, move you guys up here. Okay. So this is going to be a fairly brief presentation this evening. On October 5th, we gave the mayor and council a detailed presentation of the proposed 2021 budget, which was followed by lengthy and thoughtful discussion among council and staff. So this evening, I will briefly recap the proposed 2021 budget and touch on some of the strategic priorities that are included in this budget. And then obviously we'll leave some time at the end for any questions. And we have staff here from each department to help answer any of those questions that you may have. So kind of a year in review, looking at estimated general fund budget for this year, 2020, due to much stronger revenues than we anticipated when the COVID pandemic began. And thanks to incredible efforts by staff across the city to save money, we estimate that we're going to start the fiscal year 2021 in a very strong position. What this table shows you here is what City Council originally adopted for the 2020 budget back at the end of 2019 in the left column, and then the right column is what we're estimating the numbers are going to be at the end of the year. So you have your fund balance, which is about the same. Revenues, we're projecting about 1.8 million less than we originally budgeted for. And expenditures, we are estimating about 2.2 million, I believe, less than we budgeted for, which will increase our ending fund balance up to, from what we originally thought, about 10 million to up to about 14.5 million. And our unrestricted budget ending fund balance from 7.4 million up to almost $12 million, which was originally budgeted at 18.8%, and we're projecting it's actually going to be 32.3%. So I think a lot of hard work and due diligence to make sure that we made it through this pandemic, and we still have a ways to go, unfortunately. So we need to be cautious as we go, but this is a great step in that direction to make sure that we're maintaining our financial stability in the next year. This slide shows the total 2021 budget, which includes all of our funds. If you remember from the study session, we talked about all the different funds, the general fund being the operating budget. We have our capital budget, our bond fund, and then 7 special revenue funds. If you look in the column on the far right, that's our all funds budget for 2021. We're projecting to have about 25.8 in available cash on hand at the beginning of next year, and revenues of about 56.7 million, and expenditures of 59.4 million, which will leave at the end of the year next year, hopefully, nothing less than $23 million. If you look at the column just to the left, that includes all the funds except the 2E bond fund, if you want to see what the budget is without the bond fund, because that fund will eventually go away once the bond is paid off. Now, looking at general fund specifically, as I mentioned, that's our largest fund, and that's the operating budget that takes care of most of our daily expenses. As we mentioned on October 5th, we are very cautiously optimistic about the city's revenues over the next 15 months. However, this budget does include more conservative revenue projections, and we're showing decreases in all revenue categories for 2021, just to be very conservative. Compared to 2020, the 2021 budget is revenues is about a 4.6% decrease compared to what we are estimating to bring in at the end of this year. And the 2021 budget is a 14.3% decrease compared to what we originally budgeted for 2020. Then looking at expenditures in the general fund, we are proposing a $37.5 million budget in the general fund, and transferring 1.3 million to our capital improvement program funds for some capital projects next year, which leaves our total general fund expenditures for 21 of $38.9 million. This, compared to 2020, this is a 13% decrease to that budget. So trying to, again, be very conservative and frugal, making sure we still don't know when the pandemic is going to end. It's getting a little worse again. So we feel it's prudent to remain very conservative next year until we make it through this. We are proposing any new staffing next year. This will provide us an ending fund balance, as I mentioned earlier, of $11.8 million. And the unrestricted portion of that is about 9.4 million, which hits the city's target reserves of 25.1%. And I mentioned the 13% reduction in next year's budget, and a lot of that is due to vacant positions, deferred vehicle purchases, delayed projects, technologies, and other equipment, and reduced training and professional development for staff. We captured those expenses here in this chart. Should revenues improve over our projections by the end of this year and into 21, we may ask council to restore some of these expenditures to the 21 budget based on priority. We expect to do initial evaluation in early February and March once the 2020 financial year is closed, and we'll come back to council with an update on revenues and have a discussion about what the priorities are at that time, and if we can include any of these items back into the budget. Then briefly talking about the CIP budget, the Capital Improvement Program budget. As I mentioned earlier, we are transferring 1.3 million from the general fund reserves to help fund capital projects next year. Primarily, most of the expenditures are for the Wadsworth redevelopment improvement project, which is primarily offset by grant revenue. Additionally, other projects in 21 in the CIP budget include a small drainage project in cooperation with the city of Edgewater at 26th and Fenton, completing Lena Gulch and Clear Creek master plans, ADA improvements across the city, street striping, preventative street maintenance of 44th Avenue, and some city-owned parking lots on 38th Avenue, a new city monument signage at the shopping center at 26th and Kipling. So fairly small capital budget next year, but again, if revenues come in higher, we can potentially add back additional projects next year. And just real briefly on a couple of some of the other special revenue funds, as I mentioned earlier, open space budget, we're projecting or proposing a $2.9 million budget. And that includes phase 2 of the Prospect Park improvements, some trail maintenance and repair, open space master plan, open space improvements, and other park maintenance projects. And it does include funding for 9 of our parks and forestry employees. Conservation Trust Fund budgets, fairly small budget of just over $344,000, includes recreation facility maintenance projects, park maintenance projects, and resurfacing of basketball and tennis courts. And lastly, our 2E Investing for the Future Bond Fund. Next year, we're only projecting to have an expenditure for debt service on the bonds. We believe that we will spend all the monies we received in the bonds by the end of this year. If we don't, some of those funds may be carried over next year into the budget. We won't know until February, March, but right now we're only budgeting for the annual debt service on that bond. And despite the conservative approach to this budget does prioritize some important programs and initiatives that will serve to help realize your vision. Included in these strategic priorities is funding for the Wadsworth Boulevard project, programs and events to support our economic vitality, the 2021 resident survey, which we were going to do this year, but we put off till next year, expanded resident engagement programs, a new snowplow and other vehicles, this large item pickup program and cleanup days, preventative street maintenance, drainage improvements. Additionally, this budget does provide just over $133,000 in funding to 25 different nonprofit organizations throughout the city that provide different services to our community and our residents. And it does, finally, next year's budget does include funding for our Carnation Festival, Wheat Ridge Business District, Sustainable Wheat Ridge Committee, and Local Works. And thank you very much. As I said, this would be very brief this evening. We went over this in quite great detail on October 5th, but we are here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Goff. Before we go to questions from council, I would like to invite the public to speak. If they have any comments to make on this item, now is the time to do it. If you would raise your hand in the Zoom format, we will have Ms. Scheck bring you into the meeting. Do we have anyone with their hand raised?
No, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. I will also, if you are on the telephone and would like to speak, please unmute yourself and speak up, and we'll bring you into the meeting. And I don't hear anyone. Once again, Ms. Scheck, anyone with their hand up?
No, Mayor.
Okay, then we will close our citizens comment portion of this and go to questions from council. If you have a question, if you would please raise your hand. Ms. Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question, Patrick. In the budget, on tonight's agenda, we're looking at a possible special election. Is the cost of that special election in the city budget for 2021?
It is not.
Okay. If we were to be moving forward with that, what's the estimated cost that we'd be having to add to the budget?
I believe, if I remember, it's about $50,000 to $75,000 is what is estimated at this time.
Okay. And so if we do that, would we just have to amend the budget at that time?
Yes.
Okay.
Probably this year, even depending on whenever the election date is set, but we may have to appropriate those funds this year. So it'd probably come out of this year's budget.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions on this item? Mr. Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kind of along those lines, Patrick, as we have a special study session tonight about the Race and Equity Task Force. If there's costs associated with that, those aren't in the budget as well. Is that something we'd have to go back to as well?
That is correct, Mr. Stites. We haven't anticipated any expenses at this point. The Wheat Ridge for Equity Committee and the task force that City Council may put together. I think the intent is for them to meet for at least a couple year period and then come back to council with any items that may require a budget amendment. As we mentioned in one of our last presentations to you on race and equity in Wheat Ridge, city staff has already moved forward and the police department has moved forward with different trainings and sessions that we've paid for out of this year's budget we had funding for. So yes, there is no money in the budget for any additional expenses on top of that.
Okay, so because we had at some point we've talked about like moderators and things like that, but that would be something later. Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? Before I close the public hearing, any more questions from council? Then I'm going to close the public hearing, and Ms. Hoppy, a motion is in order.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve resolution number 52-2020, a resolution adopting the city budget and appropriating sums of money to the various funds and spending agencies for the city of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for the 2021 budget year.
Second. We have a motion and a second by Mr. Urban. Is there discussion on the motion? Ms. Hoppy.
I just really want to say thank you to staff for their hard work on putting the budget together, and also for what they did this year and kind of identifying places where they could tighten up their belts in their departments. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate everyone on council. I know we've looked at pieces and parts of the budget at a couple of different meetings, and then the budget as a whole at study session. And so I appreciate everybody just digging in and doing the work so that we could have a nice solid 25.1% reserve for next year. And we can feel secure that we're taking care of our community. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, there's no more discussion. We will vote. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your hand, and the clerk will poll the council.
Mr. Mayor, the motion has passed 8-0.
Okay, thank you so much. We will go to,
Appreciate it.
thank you. We will go to our second agenda item. Ms. Weaver, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is my speaker on? Yes, okay.
Yes, it is.
This is the referral of ordinance 1691, series 2020, an ordinance approving the rezoning of a property located at 9800 West 38th Avenue. The issue is the referendum petition has been found to be sufficient with respect to ordinance 1691, series 2020, which rezoned property at 9800 West 38th Avenue. Under section 6.2B of the charter, the council is now required to either by ordinance repeal the ordinance or by resolution refer the same to the voters of the city at the next regular election or at a special election. The earliest date for such an election is March 16th, 2021. And just to repeat the financial impact of this, the repeal of the ordinance would result in no significant immediate financial cost to the city. The referral to the voters would require a special election, the cost of which is estimated between $50,000 and $75,000.
Thank you very much. And I understand we have a staff presentation tonight by our city attorney, Mr. Dahl. Mr. Dahl.
Thank you very much. Everyone can hear me?
Yes, sir.
Terrific. And in a minute, I'll also hand off to city clerk for a quick discussion on how those costs on the election side were calculated and what the available date range is. As Councilmember Weaver described, with a sufficient referendum petition under the city's charter, the city council is required to take one of those two actions, either repeal the ordinance or send it to election. And you have the instruments you need for that in your packet in two motions, one for each of those choices. One motion would be to approve an ordinance on first reading, repealing in its entirety ordinance 1691. And that, of course, would have to go to second reading, but this would start the process. Or send it to election. I've drafted a resolution which is in form substantially similar to the resolution I drafted for the election that took place on the Upland Street rezoning referendum petition last fall. And it has also a ballot question. Obviously, if you went with that option, you would need to fill in the election date, which has to be a Tuesday within the date ranges that the city clerk will describe to you. So I wanted to just tell you about that, that procedure. I do want to turn over to the city clerk, unless you have questions of me or either one of us. But I wanted to also mention that while this might be a first reading public hearing, or excuse me, might be a first reading ordinance, and it might be a resolution, the question sometimes is asked, well, what about public comment? If it's a first reading, you typically don't take public comment on first reading. This is different, of course, because the council needs to make a decision about which way it will go. And public comments are very appropriate for the council to hear from any members of the public on this topic. So you're not constrained by the first reading rule. You also could go with a resolution. And of course, you always invite public comment on such matters. So this is one of the times when that rule does not apply. And I wanted to make sure you knew that. The mayor's aware of that and I've spoken. I'd like to defer to the city clerk. And then if you've got questions for either of us, perhaps after he's described the considerations that went into putting together the cost estimate and the date range for the potential election dates. Mr. Kirkpatrick?
Thank you. In terms of the budget, the rule of thumb is that for every voter in the city who receives a mail ballot, the minimum cost of a special election is $2 per voter. We have just over 25,000 voters registered as of the last count here in Wheat Ridge. I'm sure that may have gone up recently by a few hundred, because of course people are still registering to vote in the general election in 8 days. The schedule, the calendar, I'll give you the 35,000 foot view and then answer any detailed questions you may have. Because the cost of the election requires us to put out an RFP, the soonest we can comply with the city's purchasing regulations after an extensive study, and I want to thank Allie and the purchasing folks who helped us get this all lined up. The earliest we could actually let a contract is the week between the holidays at the end of December. Once we have done that, and what we would contract for is a firm to code the ballots so they can be checked when they're returned to see that they are legitimate, print the ballots, then mail 25,000 plus ballots to all the registered voters in Wheat Ridge. However, that must be done no later than 45 days before Election Day, because under a federal law called UOCAVA, all persons in the military or otherwise working for the federal government in foreign service, in law enforcement, in any capacity overseas get a ballot if their registered residence for voting is in Wheat Ridge. So we're basically counting from the first week of January, 45 days out. That's where we get to March 16th. That's the earliest date. We could do it later than that. There is no statutory requirement or anything in charter or code that says we have to have it done by a certain date, other than we can't do it within 90 days before the next general election, which would be way out next August, and that's not even on the radar screen. I'm happy to answer any particular questions anyone has about either the cost or the schedule.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kirkpatrick and Mr. Dahl. Before we go to questions from council, I would like to open it up to questions from the public. If you would like to speak on this agenda item number 2, if you would raise your hand in the Zoom format at this time, we'll bring you in and you may speak. Ms. Scheck, do we see any hands in the Zoom format?
Yes, I see Mr. Hardy.
Okay, Mr. Hardy, we're going to bring you into the meeting. If you would unmute yourself, give us your first name and your last name. If you would give us your address, then you will be able to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually will have my wife speak. My name is Arlan Hardy. My wife next to me is Kim Hardy. We live at 10240 West 34th Place, Wheat Ridge, Colorado. And I'll let my wife take over.
Thank you very much. Ms. Hardy, at your convenience.
Well, Ardalan and I have decided that we'd like to request that the council moves forward with Council Bill 20-2020 to repeal Ordinance 1691. That way we can avoid the cost to the voters. And after listening to the residents, we plan to substantially reduce the units in our proposed development at 9800 West 38th Avenue by 20%, and then we'll resubmit. So thank you, but that's what we would request at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Scheck, do we have additional citizens with their hands raised who would like to speak on this item?
I'm sorry, Mayor, I don't see anyone with their hands raised. I do see one caller that I've unmuted in case they would like to speak.
Okay, if there's anyone on the telephone who would like to speak on this item, please unmute yourself and speak up, and we will bring you into the meeting. Okay, I don't hear anyone. Ms. Scheck, no other callers with the Zoom hand up?
No,
Okay, I will close our citizens' right to speak on this item, and we will go to questions from council. Ms. Dozman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So prior to Ms. Hardy's statement, I was going to ask if it would be an additional cost to the city to add any items to the ballot, or if we would incur that cost no matter what.
I don't know, Mr. Kirkpatrick or Mr. Dahl, would you have an answer to that question?
I do. A larger ballot with other questions on it would not significantly even, I don't think even perceptibly change the cost. Once you get the items written that you want to appear on the ballot, which would be done by council, then we would just make a 2 or 3 or however many item ballot. As long as we don't get to 2 pages of ballots to be counted, I don't think there would be any significant change in the cost. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Yes, I believe so. Any further questions on this item before we ask for a vote? Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As it relates to the resubmission of a request by the property owner, what is the time frame before that would be brought to City Council?
Well, and Mr. Johnson may want to supplement. That's really up to the applicant and the property owner. Obviously, though, they indicated that they wanted to adjust their project. And once they have done that, they'll need to bring the project back in. It again would be, assuming the council were to repeal the zoning tonight, it would remain the zoning and it was before the ordinance was approved. Thusly, it would require a new rezoning application, which would have to go through the process, the typical process for rezoning reviews. So that would be dependent upon how quickly they were to redesign and resubmit, something we wouldn't know yet and can't really demand of them at all.
Thank you.
I guess, do we have any time frame as it relates to that? Does it take a year, 6 months, 3 days?
Mr. Johnstone, you want to?
Yeah, thanks.
In terms of the review term?
A couple comments. There is a provision in the code that precludes us from accepting a rezoning application that's substantially similar to what was potentially denied. So in the case of residential rezonings, this comes up infrequently, but it does come up. And we would factor in both kind of the percentage reduction or change, whether that be an increase or a decrease in the total number of units, and any kind of a change in what the product type might be. So is it a mix of single family and multifamily? Is it all single family? So there's really those 2 factors that we take into consideration when we make a decision whether there's been a substantial change. There needs to be a substantial change in order to process a new application within a 12-month time period. So we'd have to sit down with any kind of a new application and evaluate, whether we think whatever they might propose would be a substantial change. If it was deemed to be a substantial change, then we can process a new rezoning application, and it would go through the typical process, which starts with a neighborhood meeting, which is a precursor to any application being submitted. They'd have a pre-application with city staff prior to that neighborhood meeting, and then they'd be eligible to submit a new rezoning application that we could process. And those take somewhat of a variable period of time, but probably about a 6-month time period before it would get to city council for a public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Hoppy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Johnstone, you said that if it were denied, so because it wasn't, council voted in the positive for this. And so if we do a repeal of the ordinance, then is that actually considered a denial?
And Jerry can answer that one.
I can take that question. I appreciate the question. I understand the dynamics of it, because obviously denial creates a longer waiting period unless there's a substantial change. I've reviewed this carefully. The code isn't written with every fact pattern in mind, certainly. With hindsight, we could do that, but we don't have that. But I've come to the conclusion, and it's my opinion, that the council repealing the rezoning approval means that the application doesn't go any farther. The application to rezone was not successful. This ordinance is repealed, and you haven't acted yet, but if the council does act to repeal ordinance 1691, then the application for rezoning was not successful. There's really only 3 things that can happen with an application: get approved with conditions, or denied. Now, I recognize, Councilmember Hoppy, that council did not make a motion to deny when ordinance 1691 was originally presented. But the alternative, to say that it wasn't denied, I think is not sustainable. It was, the application was not successful. And the net result, if council were to repeal ordinance 1691, is that whole application with its application number, et cetera, is over with and was not successful, and the property ended up being zoned what it was before the application was filed. So for that reason, I conclude that it is a denial within the meaning of the code section that Mr. Johnstone referenced.
Ms. Hoppy?
Thank you for the explanation. So with that in mind, I guess my question is, I personally feel like a 20% reduction is a substantial change when you're looking at this size of project. And so how like, does city council get to have kind of a say in what is considered a substantial change, or like, how is that processed through staff, Mr. Johnstone?
Well, typically, the question in the first instance becomes a staff question when we direct an applicant whether they would be eligible to resubmit sooner than that 12-month timeframe, because we deem it to be a substantially different application. That said, the way the code is actually written is ultimately city council is the ultimate arbiter of that decision. And even if staff would, be of an opinion that it wasn't a substantial change, but an applicant would wish to proceed, they could proceed. And ultimately, in making that final decision on acting on the rezoning application, you would be kind of concurrently making the decision that it was a substantial change and therefore eligible to be processed in that time frame of sooner than 12 months from the denial. And I'll let Jerry augment that in any manner that he might want to.
I think that's just about right. That's accurate. Obviously, you don't have an application in front of you, and while these questions are reasonable, and I don't mean to say they are not, they're pertinent. At some point, it's the applicant that has to and the property owners here that have to make some decisions, go through their process and provide something, and it wouldn't be able to prejudge that here tonight, and we shouldn't. But it's fair to ask about procedure, which you are asking here. What I wouldn't do is put Mr. Johnstone or yourselves in the position of saying, well, if this change is made, then tonight we're going to decide that that is or is not an application that can proceed in the following way under the code. That I would ask you to refrain from, but you see the line I would like to draw here. Perfectly appropriate to talk about process, and I'm glad you're asking.
Thank you. So then I just have a quick follow-up question on that. So just some clarification. So would there be like an official process that would have to happen for it to come back to city council to see it? Would it be like if you told the applicant, we don't consider this a substantial change, then does the applicant have an opportunity to appeal that to city council, or how does that work? Like how does like city council get to that point? And then also, if we do repeal the ordinance tonight, that means then should we all assume that the property is going back under a quasi judicial format?
If I can answer the second question and Mr. Johnson can answer the first, that would be my suggestion. It's the quasi judicial process has ended with respect to this application, or the application that's in front of you, and I've so held. A quasi judicial process would not start again until an actual application was filed again by the Hardys. So in between now and whenever that happens, it's not quasi judicial. There's no pending application. Mr. Johnstone?
Yes, and I would say, again, all great questions procedurally. There's not really a process to get that determination in front of city council. I think as I tried to note previously, ultimately, it is city council's decision in the context of processing a rezoning application through a public hearing. So we'd have to think, I guess, creatively, whether there was some process that would be appropriate should there be a desire to get that kind of first instance question in front of city council. It's not one I've had posed to me before, but absent that, I think we would just allow an applicant to, regardless of what our kind of initial reaction is as to whether it's a substantial change, to be able to proceed through the normal submittal process and referral process, and then ultimately the scheduling of public hearings before the Planning Commission and City Council through as an ordinance.
Thank you. I have Mr. Stites and then Ms. Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm not sure if Mr. Dahl and Mr. Johnstone already answered my question, but I was going to ask if we should put into if we did decide to move forward with rescinding it, put into the motion on the second reading that there's a waiver of the year period with something, or can we put in some provision with that motion that that's waived, or that there's a specific amount of change or something like that?
No, I would recommend against that. These two matters are separate. Yes, they would involve the same property, but they're very separate. Your obligation under the charter with respect to the petition is to either repeal the ordinance or send the question to the voters. And you do one of those two things, and then you've dealt with that case. To the extent the applicant files a new application, then you deal with that. And I agree with Mr. Johnstone. He and I would probably want to confer a little on process on that determination for the questions you've asked about how it would go to council. But my initial reaction is that it comes to you, and if there's a recommendation that it's not a substantial change, then that's something we'd staff up for your consideration when, as and if that application got submitted and made its way to you. I want to spend more time with Mr. Johnstone on that, but The line I'm drawing is that there are two very separate cases, and you need to only deal with what the charter lets you deal with tonight.
Thank you. Ms. Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me. To that extent, if we were to move forward with referring the question to the ballot, and if it were to move forward, and if it were to be revoked by the voters in March, would that set the date for reapplication similarly to the date being reset if we resend it now? I guess if the voters revoke the zoning in the spring, when would they be eligible to reapply?
The question is really, what's the date of denial?
Right.
Right? Yeah, if you repeal this ordinance, the date of denial, by the way, would not be tonight. It would be November the 9th. The way the ordinance is set up right now for second reading, it's effective on adoption at second reading. So the date of denial would be November 9th. If it went to the voters and the voters upheld the ordinance, the rezoning, then it's been approved. If the voters did not and did not uphold the ordinance, then my opinion is the date of denial would be the effective date of that election.
Okay.
Because you don't know yet until the voters would act. No sooner if the council acts, and that's on your plate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions, Mr. Urban?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if we play this out and the ordinance is repealed, the applicant reapplies, this is presented to city council, an ordinance comes out of city council relative to this rezoning, the petitioners or other petitioners within the city wouldn't be precluded from initiating a subsequent petition and bringing us back to where we are. Is that correct?
No, not at all, because it's a new case. It's a new rezoning case, which is available for referendum just as any rezoning case is.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions from council? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Weaver, may I have a motion on this item?
Sure. Okay. I move to approve Council Bill number 20-2020, an ordinance repealing Ordinance 1691, Series 2020 on first reading, order it published, public hearing set for Monday, November 9th, 2020 at 7 p.m. as a virtual meeting, and that it take effect immediately upon adoption.
Second.
There's a motion and a second by Mr. Urban. Is there discussion on the motion? Ms. Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, I mean, this is a hard vote, of course, and with the Hardy's statement of wanting to come back to council, I will be voting to repeal this ordinance. However, I would really like to speak directly to the public and specifically to the group of Save Our Neighborhoods. The Hardys exhibit the exact kind of members of this community and developers that we would like to see in Wheat Ridge. They are long-term residents that have lived here for decades. They want to invest in their community. They've listened to the public and came back with an original plan that was far less than what was originally or proposed beforehand from a different developer. And I really just want our community to be aware of the repercussions that we are facing when we are driving this kind of incentive and these kinds of very thoughtful developers out of town. The Hardys have spoken at several council meetings, and I understand that change is very, very difficult to handle in our community and to grasp sometimes. But like this, if we were to see a development happen in this area, the Hardys are the people that I think we would want to see it be done by. And I've really appreciated them coming to council, to speaking to our community and listening to our community members. And I think that their suggestion or ask that we repeal this ordinance just speaks to their integrity and their love for this community and listening to the constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? Ms. Hulteen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to just echo everything Councilwoman Dozman just said. The Hardys have brought forward a thoughtful quality development and, significantly reduced in density from what we'd seen previously. And I just want to, also speak to the public in that, we as a council made an informed decision based off of the actual facts of the proposal that we got in the context of the neighborhood surrounding it, the fact that it's on a busy street. We took all of that into consideration, and it isn't just us pushing forward like we want development, we're trying to do high density. This is a low to medium density, and now is going to be a lower density when it comes back to us. And so I just really encourage everyone to get the facts about the project. And a lot of things I heard were people concerned about, like the flow of water and the water quality. All of these projects have engineers and certifications, and everyone's looking at all of those things that we can conjecture as citizens. But at the end of the day, the Hardys own this property. They're not speculators. It's in the district that they live in. It is just a couple miles from their house where they raise their children. So we all care about our community, but speculation about what their problems might be should not get in the way of actually understanding the facts. And the Hardys are the highest quality citizens our city could ever want. And I really hope that we can move forward working with, a couple like the Hardys, because I would love to see other people in our city get excited about their visions of other corners that are hard to develop. I'd much rather hear from more citizens. And if we can't work with the Hardys to make a project like this work, I think it's really going to be hard to bring high quality development. We heard from Thrive Builders tonight. They're getting national recognition for what they're building in our city. And I want people to bring their best to our city. And in order to bring our best, we need to support and listen to the facts and realize we're not always going to get everything we want, but when we get something good, we need to be able to work with it. So I will also be supporting resending this with a heavy, heavy heart, because a lot of hard work, our staff time, our citizens' time, has gone into bringing forward quality development. And I'm looking forward to seeing the next project when it comes forward from the Hardys. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I completely agree with Councilwoman Dozman and Councilwoman Hulteen. This project was less than what is allowed by the city charter, and the city charter is the people's document that that we really kind of is supposed to be our guiding star. And we looked at all of the evidence, like Councilwoman Hulteen said, and there are things where people can say nobody's going to want to buy that because it doesn't have a yard or the yard's not big enough. But the reality is there are a lot of different people out there in the market, and this project was an awesome project for starter homes, and then also for people to move out of their larger homes into something small. And so we can build a move up market in our community. We need these types of projects. And if we can't build a move up market in our community, we're not building an inclusive community. And so, I'm really disappointed to not see this project as it was, because I thought it was a really, really great piece. But I'm look forward to seeing how it comes out when it comes back. And I really am. I feel bad for all of the staff time that's gone into this. I feel bad for all the time that the Hardys have put into this, and for it to now get put on the reverse. But I really appreciate them working hard to bring us a project that we can put in our community so that we can help build an inclusive community.
Thank you, Mr. Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to echo what was said before me, I completely agree. And, I hear from residents, especially longtime residents, and, it's, there are people who've lived here longer than I have, but it's tough to say that there are people who've been involved longer in the city of Wheat Ridge than I have, since I've been going to council meetings since I was 2. But, there's something that you notice for people that go to council meetings. It's a lot of people show up for the beginning, they do the public comment, and then a lot of people leave. or they turn it out and they say, okay, well, we said what we need to say, and then they tune in maybe the next day for the decision, but they don't see all the work in the middle. And you know, by the time it actually gets to city council, there's countless hours and hours and hours. And we did a planning 101 session a couple of months ago where our planning department talked about all of the proposals that they get for many of these properties that they turn down before they even become a full proposal. So it's very important that as citizens that we don't just look at that one vote that one day. There's a lot of work that goes into this. And you know, when we pay our planning department quite a bit of money, we talked about the budget tonight, and those are experts in a field. So I'm not an expert planner, but when we look at that, I expect when we ask them questions and they answer them, we take those answers a little more seriously than we do when a citizen comes to us with something they drew up on a cocktail at Clancy, a cocktail napkin from Clancy's. You know, there's a lot of math and a lot of science that goes into this. So our staff is actually pretty good at what they do. And so when we vote yes on something, we're not looking to turn this back on the citizens. This isn't a war between the city government and the city council and the staff and the citizens. This is us trying to move the city forward in the best possible way. And the Hardys brought something forward that these are long-term residents who've lived here forever. Their kids went to Wheat Ridge High School and all of that. These are people that have invested in our community and want to continue to invest in our community, and that means a lot. And as somebody who's been here for a long time, but can't say that they're a lifelong Wheat Ridge resident, because frankly, when I was trying to, in my 20s, become a lifelong Wheat Ridge resident and buy a house or an apartment or a townhome or something here, there wasn't anything here to buy. So we need some housing diversity. We need things for starters, and we need people for them to age out, because at some point I'm not going to want to take care of my yard when my kids move out. So that might be a great opportunity for my wife and I to move there, or somebody else in the neighborhood to move there. So we need to find ways for people to stay in the city a lot longer. So I hope our residents look to this. And I will say too, I don't know if we have groups that are misleading our residents, but I only got one phone call on this issue, and the phone call was from somebody who was upset that I voted to tear down the Apple Ridge Cafe to build up a bunch of townhomes. So I don't know if that's somebody playing telephone with the message or if that's the message getting out, and that's a problem. Okay, so thank you. I look forward to seeing what the next proposal is. I think that 20% seems like a very reasonable reduction. So I'd like to see what that is, and I will be voting to rescind this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, we will vote. All those in favor of the motion signify by raising your hand, and the clerk will count the votes.
Mr. Mayor, the motion to repeal has passed 8-0.
Okay, thank you very much. We will move now to agenda item number 3. Mr. Urban, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Resolution 53-2020, a resolution levying general property taxes for the year 2020 to help defray the cost of government for the city of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for the 2021 budget year. At issue is that section 39-5-128 of the Colorado Revised Statute requires Jefferson County assessor to certify to the city the total valuation for assessment of all property tax located within the territorial limits of the city of Wheat Ridge. And I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Urban. Mr. Goff, do we have a presentation on this item?
I don't think we have anything beyond that. This is something that we're required to do annually, and because of Tabor, city council cannot change our mill levy without going to the vote of the people. So we will be certified at 1.830, which is what we've had for many years, and it's one of the lowest mill levy rates in the area. We get about, on average, probably about $50 per household for in property tax for the city of Wheat Ridge with this mill levy.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Goff. I will open this up for public comment. If you would like to comment on this, if you are on the Zoom format, please raise your hand, and Ms. Scheck will bring you into the discussion. Is there anyone with their hand raised in the Zoom format?
No, Mayor.
Okay, is there anyone on the telephone who would like to speak on this item from the public? You may do so now. If you will unmute yourself and ask to speak, we'll bring you into the meeting. Okay, we will close our public comment on this item and go for any questions or discussions before we have a motion from council. Okay, seeing none, Mr. Urban, may I have a motion on this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve Resolution 53-2020, a resolution levying general property taxes for the year 2020 to help defray the cost of government for the city of Wheat Ridge and for the budget year 2021.
Second.
Okay, we have a budget and who had the second on that?
I did.
Ms. Hulteen. Is there a discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion signify by raising your hand and the clerk will count the votes.
Mr. Mayor, the motion is passed unanimously.
8-0. Thank you very much. We will go to agenda item number 4. Ms. Hutchinson, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Resolution number 54-2020, a resolution requesting transfer of title ownership of Panorama Park, Paramount Park, Randall Park, and a portion of Johnson Park from Jefferson County to the city of Wheat Ridge. Do you want me to read the issue? It's about the same.
Sure, go ahead and read it.
Okay. The city of Wheat Ridge is requesting that specific park properties located in and maintained by Wheat Ridge, currently titled to Jefferson County, be retitled to the city of Wheat Ridge. These park properties are Panorama Park, Paramount Park, Randall Park, and a portion of Johnson Park.
Thank you very much. Mr. Goff, do we have a staff presentation on this item?
Yeah, we'll give some brief background on this. I'll start and turn it over to Karen O'Donnell, and Jerry Dahl's been working on this too for quite some time. And also just want to mention that Joyce Manwaring, our former Parks and Rec director, was working on this for many years with the county, and her hope was to get this done before she left. But unfortunately, we just heard back from the county that they're ready to move forward. So I thank Joyce for getting it to where it is this evening, and then Karen and Jerry picked it up and got it to where it is. So Karen, did you want to start?
Sure. The 4 park properties that were already mentioned were part of the now defunct Wheat Ridge Rec District, and they've just not been transferred to the city's ownership subsequent to the incorporation of Wheat Ridge and the dissolution of the district. We have operated and maintained these parks since the city was incorporated in 1969. So really, from my perception, it's just a formality. And the mayor drafted a letter in June of 2019 requesting this retitling. And as Patrick mentioned, it's taken a bit of time, but I received a call from the director of Jefferson County Open Space requesting a resolution from City Council as the next step. And I don't know if anybody wants to add anything.
Okay, thank you, Ms. O'Donnell. Mr. Dollar, do you have anything new to add to the discussion? Okay, you were on mute, but it looks like you don't.
I don't. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for confirming that. Before we go to questions from council, I'll open it up to the public for questions or on this item. If you would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand in the Zoom format or ask to speak, unmute yourself and ask to speak if you are on the telephone. Ms. Check, do we have anyone with their hand raised?
No, Mayor.
Okay.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. We do. I was too quick.
Okay.
1 second, we have Guy.
Okay. All right, Mr. Namiach, if you would unmute yourself and give us your first name and last name, if you would, or spell your last name and give us your address, and you may go ahead after that.
Guy Namiach, Nahmiach, 3650 Ward Road. One quick question. Good evening, everybody. Just, are there any more parks that are still on Jeffco's, or this is just the last bit of it?
These are the last parcels that are still titled to the county.
Is there a chance of getting like Crown Hill, that's the counties?
Yeah, sure, you go for it, Guy.
All right, thank you, guys.
All right, thank you, Mr. Namiaj. Okay, I don't hear anyone else in the public who would like to speak on this item. You may do so now. Do we have anyone else with their hand raised or on the telephone?
No, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. We will close our public comment and I will go to questions from council. Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Given that it's been over a year since we've submitted this request to the county, what's the estimated time frame for us to receive this conveyance?
Good question.
Your guess is as good as mine.
Done this
Councilmember
decade.
Urban, I think that my experience with this in terms of the city's interaction with the county is that it's not high on their priority list and gets moved to the bottom of a stack. And I'm heartened that they actually did reach out to Ms. O'Donnell, and all we can do is pass the resolution they've asked for and send it to them, and maybe send some reminder emails to the appropriate staffs over there to slide it in front of the county commissioners. So we'll keep pressure on.
Is it appropriate to include the words expeditious in this resolution, or is that too aggressive?
I don't think it would matter either way, frankly.
Mr. Urban, I will say that when I'm able to talk with the commissioners, I do bring this up with them and tell them that we want to get this done. So it has taken a while, but it's still up on the to-do list, but we're working on it.
Sounds good.
Any additional comments? Ms. Dozman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Namiash asked one of my questions as far as if there are any parkland parcels that are still needing to be adjudicated to Wheat Ridge. But as far as that goes, first, Karen, I love your background, and I don't know if that's an actual photo. So if it is, could you please tell us where it is? And then I definitely wanted to ask about Johnson Park. So the sign is not visible from Wadsworth any longer, and I'm kind of wondering if that's a park anymore or what our plans are to do with that park in the future.
It still is a park, so I'm not sure. I'll have to go check out the signage and get back to you, Ms. Dozman. And to answer your other question, that's Mount Beardstadt. And Allie has her hands up like this, and I'm next to her. Marianne Schilling took the photo.
And is that a big elk in the background?
Oh, that's Allie.
I think that's Allie, Mayor.
Oh, that's Allie. I'm sorry. I thought it was. Okay.
Forever, Allie. We'll remember this forever.
Good.
Couldn't find my unmute
Okay. Okay. Well, there certainly must not be much discussion on this item. So let us go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your hand, and the clerk will count the hands.
Oh, we had him.
Mr. Mayor, I just need to ask you, did we get a main motion yet and a second? Because I don't think we did.
Okay. Maybe we're okay. So we're even ahead of ourselves. It threw me there. Okay. Ms. Hutchinson, may I have a motion on this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to state about the background, it's probably not Granby or Grand Lake. Okay, so I move to approve resolution number 54-2020, a resolution requesting transfer of title ownership of Panorama Park, Paramount Park, Randall Park, and a portion of Johnson Park from Jefferson County to the city of Wheat Ridge.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second by Mr. Stites. We will continue if we want to have discussion on the motion or the photos.
Photos.
Okay, seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your hand, and the clerk will count the votes.
Mr. Mayor, there are 8 votes in favor and 1 elk who said I abstain.
Okay, thank you so much. With that, we will conclude item number 4, thankfully, and go to item number 5 and ask Ms. Nosler Beck to introduce this item.
Thanks, Mayor. Resolution number
55-2020, a resolution approving an amendment to the grant agreement with Great Outdoors Colorado for the Prospect Park Phase 2 project. At issue, the city was awarded $350,000 from Great Outdoors Colorado, GOCO, in 2018, and an additional $162,970 from GOCO in 2020 for the Prospect Park Phase 2 project. In 2018, the city entered into a grant agreement with GOCO to accept the $350,000 award and use it for the Prospect Park Phase 2 project. To accept the additional $162,970 award from GOCO in 2020, the city must either enter into a second grant agreement with GOCO for these funds, or agree to amend the 2018 agreement to also include the $162,970 award for the same project. Either way, the grant agreements would extend through March 31st, 2022. The Parks and Recreation Department is recommending the amendment option as it will allow for simpler reimbursement and management of funds, grant reporting, and project management. GOCO does not have a preference of either option.
Thank you. Mr. Goff, do we have a presentation on this past our issue statement?
Not sure if we have much at all. If Karen have.
Okay. Ms. O'Donnell, anything you'd like to add to the?
I was going to say that issue is pretty in depth. I don't think I have anything to add other than from staff perspective, it would just be easier to manage one grant as opposed to two.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we go to questions from council, we'll open this up to questions from the public. If you would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand in the Zoom format, or if you're on the telephone, please unmute yourself and ask to be recognized. Check, do we have anyone who's raised their hands in the Zoom format?
No, Mayor.
Okay, I don't hear anyone from the public wishing to speak, so I will go to council for questions. Does anyone have a question on this item? Okay, seeing none, I will ask Ms. Nosler-Beck to provide us a motion on this item.
Thanks, Mayor. I move to approve resolution number 55-2020, a resolution approving an amendment to the grant agreement with Great Outdoors Colorado for the Prospect Park Phase 2 project.
Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Urban. Is there discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand and the clerk will count the hands.
Mr. Mayor, the motion has passed unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much. This concludes our regular agenda item. We will now go to city managers matters. Mr. Goff.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple real quick things. I'm sharing my screen here real quick, and I'm not sure if anybody on council has seen this recently, but this was just updated. This is the, unfortunately, the COVID graph for Jefferson County. As you can see, it's increasing, whoops, just lost it, pretty substantially here over the last few weeks. So I think we mentioned on last week's council meeting, Jefferson County is over the threshold. The number of allowed cases on an average 2-week period. And I think we have until the end of this week for our kind of probation period. And then the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment will make a decision on what restrictions will come back to the county. Some of those restrictions include, unfortunately, closing gyms. So our rec center may have to close again. And restaurants have to go down to 25% capacity, and group sizes for different events have to go down to smaller levels too. So just very important for our community to be diligent about being safe and social distancing so we can get these numbers down. Hate for this to have a negative impact on the city's health and our population and our economy. So hopefully we see some changes. I did sign today an extension to our temporary waiver for outdoor dining restrictions until December 31st. If you remember, that original original waiver was through October 31st. So the governor has encouraged all cities to do what they can to continue helping businesses through the winter months. And so we have extended that temporary waiver for now through December 31st. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. City Attorney's Matters, Mr. Dahl.
Yes, I have one item to bring to council and ask for your direction on, and that's signage regarding open carry of firearms in public buildings and spaces. This was brought to our attention at staff level because of the upcoming election and the public buildings that would be available for that. We did research, and we were able to say that the city can post some signs, and we posted some signs at the recreation center saying that open carry is prohibited. But open carry those prohibitions are merely signs at this point, representing a policy, but not an enforceable policy in the sense of any kind of ticket into the municipal court. The background that you're probably aware of, but for all of us to be on the same page, let me distinguish between concealed carry and open carry. Concealed carry permits, and if you acquire a concealed carry permit, the law is really clear, both from statute and from the Colorado Supreme Court, that the city may not prohibit concealed carry in any city buildings unless it puts in place permanent screening facilities, like you see when we have municipal court, so that there aren't firearms in the courtroom. We're allowed to do that because there's a screening process and there's a person that runs that. But other than that, open carry is allowed and enforced or has protection of the law in city buildings. If you're a private employer, you can prohibit concealed carry. When I say open carry, I meant concealed carry. You can prohibit concealed carry on your property. Concealed carry is prohibited on some, I think, elementary up through high school grounds, but interestingly, not in universities. And that was a case brought by some students of the University of Colorado that challenged the University of Colorado's rule or attempted rule to prohibit concealed carry on the university grounds. So the net of that is cities and public buildings, unless specifically called out in the statute, and ours aren't, are subject to concealed carry. That's not the question I'm asking you, but it's part of the landscape. Wanted to make sure people were aware of that. Open carry, of course, is exactly what it means, carrying a gun on your hip that's in view of others. The statute enacted by the legislature in 2003 does give local governments the authority to prohibit open carry and to post signs. If it's going to prohibit it, it must post signs. And while we have a policy presently prohibiting open carry on some city buildings, and we've enforced that through the posting of signs, there's no ticket into municipal court because there is no ordinance basis for that. And that brings me to the question I would have for you is whether you would wish to direct the staff to bring forward such an ordinance. I can tell you that in 2013, Jefferson County did so and has a prohibition on open carry on most county buildings and some county properties. Actually, Jefferson County Open Space has a prohibition of open carry on open space properties, and there's a fine for that. Jefferson County went through a process of requiring or authorizing the county sheriff to engage in a kind of a threat assessment evaluation of various buildings, and then impose the open carry prohibition on those buildings after the sheriff had gone through that. You're not required to do that. I've looked at a few other cities' ordinances, and many of them, of course, have exceptions for police officers, of course, in the performance of their duties, persons defending their own home and on their own property. And so there can be a list of exceptions or affirmative defenses to the general prohibition. Of course, it's a charged environment, but I will tell you that the impetus for the Jefferson County prohibition, I read some of the news articles and the staff reports, were that there were some people that were going into offices, the Human Services Office, the Planning Department, District Attorney's offices, that would be open carrying, and they were allowed to do that unless there were a prohibition, but it was very difficult for the staff in those buildings, and they had to clear a building because staff did not feel safe. That's the question. It's not something necessarily that you have to decide tonight, but you could direct me to work with the police chief to bring forward an ordinance for first reading, or to bring it to a study session, if you like. These ordinances are not particularly lengthy at all. There are a few policy choices to make around them. As I described, it could either be a list of properties, or you could delegate that to the police department as the county did. Here we've got a pretty limited number of buildings that we're very aware of, and you can probably make a decision around whether you would like to have that policy or not in place. And the reason it came up is because of the use of properties for elections and just the heightened awareness as a result of that. There's no other timing involved here, if you're kind of wondering why I'm asking tonight. The question came up, and I think it's because of the election. Questions?
Thank you. Ms. Hoppy had her hand up, so we'll go to Ms. Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Dahl, so what you're saying is that we already have an ordinance that says you can't open carry on at city buildings, but that it doesn't have any sort of ticket or any sort of vehicle of consequence that goes with it. Is that what you're saying?
Close. We don't have an ordinance at all. There's nothing in the code. All we have is a policy. Basically, the city manager is allowed to say, have this policy, and the policy is supported by signs. But if someone walks into a building and we say, we've got a policy, you have to leave, hopefully they will. Whether they do or not, if they don't, there's no ticket that we can write.
So could it potentially be like a trespassing issue though? Like if they don't leave after they've been asked to leave and they're not following the policy of open carry, then the consequence vehicle could potentially be trespassing. But other than that, like we could call the police and say, this person's here against our policy, and they could just ask them to leave and not ticket them. Or I'm just wondering if it's necessary in this situation for us to do this before, like before the elections, because I feel like this is going to be a bigger can of worms than originally thought. So
from a timing standpoint, we wouldn't be able to get it done before the election anyhow, obviously. And the election just brought it to, I think it's probably fair to say, it brought it to the staff's attention. But I wanted to trigger or communicate to you that this is not a solution that has to be done before the election, but it did bring it to the staff's attention. Relative to sort of what we could do if someone challenges that and says, well, show me. You have a written policy that says that, but there's no ticket that can be written. I think it would be a little difficult for the police department to, and I see the chief is on, and maybe he might want to weigh in, but I think it'd be difficult for the police department if they were called to enforce a policy versus something that's really an ordinance where you can write an offense. If I were the patrol officer, it would be a little difficult to do that. Not impossible. We have other policies that we have for the parks, for example, that aren't all municipal court tickets, and you kind of rely on people's desire to cooperate. I don't think a trespass ticket would work because that's really not I don't think a trespass ticket would work. I don't think you could write it, but I think I don't think it would get a conviction.
Thank you. I had a question from Ms. Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So currently we do not have any open carry laws on the books, correct?
That's correct.
So are you asking that we implement something?
Yes, I'm I'm asking you if you want to, and describing what other jurisdictions are doing and describing the environment, I guess, that gave rise to the request, which is
Okay.
some employees at the rec center saying, gosh, if this is going to be a polling place, what's going to happen about guns? If there are guns coming in, is there going to be any kind of statement that they should not be present?
Okay, so open carrying, you're differentiating from a legal concealed weapon, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
So as a concealed weapon permit owner, like you cannot restrict my right to carry a firearm concealed, so long as there is not a device that would screening device at both entrances and exits of the building.
That's absolutely right.
Okay, so one, I kind of want to, or am curious about the like why this is such an issue now, and if Wheat Ridge has ever faced an issue of this before, or is it just because we have had more polling places opened recently that this has become an issue?
Carrie, I can speak to this if you like.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we received a message from the county clerk asking if we had a concealed or open carry ordinance in the city, because they're concerned that because they're managing and staffing these polling locations. And this year we're going to have a polling location at the rec center on the 30th and 31st and the 2nd and 3rd. And then there's going to be a polling place at City Hall on the 2nd and 3rd. So as Mr. Dahl said, they brought it to our attention. We told them we don't. So they have concerns that we don't. I think as Mr. Dahl says, if you watch the news, there's a lot of conflict out there across the country and concerns that people are going to come to polling places with guns to potentially intimidate other voters. And I think that's something we want to try to avoid if we can. And for the safety of our employees. And we
right. So is there a way that we can differentiate between voter intimidation versus just open carry or concealed carry in that respect? Or
well, in my opinion, as city manager, this was an issue we brought to previous council years ago, and they did not want to move forward at that time. But it's a safety issue, not just that election. In my mind, it's my responsibility to make sure employees and our customers are safe. And I just don't. We have a lot of people that don't feel safe today in this world, unfortunately, and more and more people are trying to intimidate people with open carry guns during an election or not. So I don't think it's tied, in my opinion, directly to the election. It just was brought to our attention because the county asked us if we had or had not a open carry ordinance, and we had to tell them we did not.
Okay, so I appreciate that, clarification, but and I'm sure others on council have received some of those form emails in regards to election and voter intimidation, and I feel like that may have been the reason why we're having this conversation, because I mean, as far as I know, we haven't up to this point had any issues. So I really feel like this is one of those things where we're creating something out of nothing. And I know that this year is a highly contentious, very divisive election, but I really, really want to refrain from stomping on people's rights, especially when we're talking about voting in elections. There are certain rights that are beholden to us as American citizens and as voters, and I completely understand. We don't want people to be fearful of voting, and I understand that maybe staff has brought forth some concerns, but I really don't think that this is necessary to have a conversation unless we've had issues.
Well, I wouldn't say we have people coming into our facilities daily with open carry guns, Ms. Dozman, but it only takes once that somebody comes in with a gun and injures and hurts somebody. Just because we have this ordinance, is that going to stop somebody? No. But you know, we've had over the last couple of years, the First Amendment folks who have come into our buildings and harassed employees and scared employees to death. I can't tell you if they've had weapons on them or not. I don't think they had any open carry weapons, but it's a different environment out there. And I think anything that we can have in place to give our employees some assurance that we're respectful of their safety, I think is helpful.
Thank you. I have Ms. Weaver and then Mr. Stites, and then Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really do feel like there's a really big difference actually between concealed carry, because that's a permitted weapon, and I'm also a gun owner, and I'm also a permitted gun owner, and I really feel strongly that we should have regulation for the safety of our city employees, that an open weapon is not okay. I'd also love to hear from our chief about his experience with these kinds of things. If you could just give us a moment of your thoughts on this, Chief Bertha.
Thank you, Ms. Weaver. At the risk of not answering your question, I try and be very apolitical and take my direction from the politicians and the leaders in this city. I will suggest that the earlier reference that we could use trespass as a possible alternative. I think Mr. Dahl is very correct to say that would certainly potentially cause more harm than good. I think you're talking about a Second Amendment right, and if that's the sole basis of a trespass in a public space, I think that might get us in a bit of trouble. I do worry about our employees. I echo the sentiments of Mr. Goff, and you know, I understand Ms. Dozman's comments on protecting our Second Amendment rights. I will suggest to you that I talk to my peers, and they are concerned not only about this election, but about the rancor that exists out there, where people are using the Second Amendment to intimidate people for all kinds of reasons. So I can only say that I'll follow your direction, but I'm certainly in favor, if there's a need for a threat assessment in these buildings, to do that and do the work that's required with Mr. Dahl to figure out, you know, where that stands, if that's an option for people.
Thank you. I have Mr. Stites and then Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question, less about the guns and more about the Jefferson County and the elections. Is there a number of polling places that we're required to have in Wheat Ridge, and can they change that number based on how safe they feel having those elections here, or having those polling places here?
I don't have the answer to that. Mr. Goff, do you, or Mr. Kirkpatrick?
I was hoping maybe the city clerk could address that. I don't know.
Ever since we went to mail balloting, the polling places have been obviously dramatically reduced. Sometimes the county decides to add polling places based upon their projected demand. And obviously this election coming up is going to create an awful lot of voter participation. That's the reason the county added more vote service centers, as they call them, polling places, as well as voter registration locations. As far as I know, there is no county or state law that says you have to have a certain number of polling places per so many people, or over so much distance. So the county makes its decision based upon what the election officials believe is an adequate number of polling places on an election by election basis. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I think so. I just wonder if the county can reduce the number of polling places if they don't feel safe enough about having it here. I guess for me, before we move forward with this discussion more, I would like to send this to a study session or something like that, so we have a chance to get public input. And I definitely don't feel comfortable making a decision like this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we're talking about open carry, concealed carry, I don't see any signs about that anywhere. I will see signs that say no weapons allowed. And I don't know what the penalty is or anything, but to me, that's pretty clear. I know people have a right to own a gun. I have a right to not be shot also. So that's the other side of it. But I'm wondering, does this also, what about businesses where there, you know, a lot of people are coming in and things, you know, we've just had a, you know, a death over there at Kipling and 44th or whatever like that. But, you know, can business owners just put up a sign that says no weapons allowed?
Yes, they can. The statute allows businesses to prohibit all forms of weapons on their private property. But it does not, you know, extend the same to governments. Open carry is allowed on public property unless you have an ordinance, and concealed carry allowed on public property with a few exceptions, as I described, elementary schools, etc.
So what about the parks? It's okay to have open carry in the parks.
In Jefferson County, no. On open space parks, the answer is no, because Jefferson County has made that restriction. In the city of Wheat Ridge, parks are open carry is allowed because it has not been prohibited. You have the right to do so.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be good to have more discussion on that.
Okay, thank you. I have Ms. Nosler back and then Ms. Hoppy. You're mute.
No, you're still on mute.
You're still on mute.
I just pressed the space bar. I didn't press the unmute. Patrick, I had a question, or maybe this is a question for Jerry, because I do agree that this is probably worth a larger conversation with for a study session, like Councilman Stites recommended. But because the elections are Tuesday, like a week from tomorrow, is what we've heard from the clerk's office, from George Stern's office. Are they making any recommendations that we could implement for just the polling locations for elections in Wheat Ridge?
What we got
and then I can have
was a question if we have an ordinance that prohibits open carry of firearms in city buildings. And the only question they asked was if we had such an ordinance in place, which obviously we don't, and did we want to put up signs that say no open carry, or have them put up signs that say no open carry? That's how this conversation started. I don't know why the county is asking that question, other than there are some municipalities that do prohibit firearms on city property in Colorado. And they're just trying to be clear about what the rules are at City Hall and the rec center. That was their only purpose. They did not say anything to me. And they may have said something to someone else, to Patrick or somebody, about, you know, we've heard these rumors, but they did not raise any such concern to me.
Okay.
So-
I have. Did that answer your question, or?
I guess so, but so the county clerk, if I'm understanding this correctly, came to us and said, do you have open carry restrictions at all
Hall.
city buildings?
Yes.
Not asking for polling locations, but because it's the clerk, we've deduced that it's because it's polling locations that they're trying to get at.
Yes.
I'm just trying to see if there's a way to solve for what we're trying to solve for tonight. It doesn't sound like we're going to be able to make a decision on it if it's going to be talking about all city buildings.
I would just comment that there are many, many exceptions to open carry in the state law. As you all are well aware,
Yeah.
a liquor licensee does not allow people to bring a firearm into a bar. There
Right.
are-
I don't want to get into that. I'm just anyway, I think I understand that there's not really clear guidance on that.
Well, you know, we could pass an ordinance that says you can't bring a gun into a polling place in the city. Period.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Hoppy, and then Mr. Urban, and then Ms. Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want us to be respectful of the fact that we have another special study session. So this is not the end of our meeting time. So we still have a whole nother study session that we're doing tonight. And so I don't know if there are maybe two people that would like to ask for this to be put on as a future study session. Then Zach, I see your hand, and Corey, I see yours. I see yours, Rachel. So then maybe we can move on instead of having an impromptu study session about this issue for tonight. And then the only other question I have is perhaps we can have off-duty officers at the polls on those days. But you know, if that, I think that as far as the safety goes, I completely trust the city manager to figure out what he can do with what's already on our books for the safety of the polls. And maybe we just move this on to a future study session and move on with our evening.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Chief Murtha.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say, with respect to the placing of police officers at the poll, I understand. I think Ms. Hoppy was alluding to non-uniformed officers. We do try and stay away from uniformed officers at the polling place. But just to be clear, is that what you were asking for, Ms. Hoppy? Somebody without a uniform on? Because we try and keep away so we don't appear to be intimidating in our own right for these events. And let me just add before you answer that, I did have some briefings with the FBI and others. There's no specific threats at polling places right now that they're aware of or that we're aware of. This is just because there are some events nationally, but nothing has been, no intelligence has been uncovered in Colorado for this sort of activity.
I just was saying that I feel comfortable to leave it up to you, Chief, and the city manager to decide how to best protect our citizens during the voting time this year.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had, with their hand up, Mr. Urban and then Ms. Dozeman, if you still have something that you'd like to say.
I was going to ask to move this to a study session. That is it.
Okay, Ms. Dozeman.
The space bar didn't work for me. Yeah, I would like to kind of reiterate the whole taking it to a study session. And if this is an urgent issue because of the election, I think that officers, whether they're in uniform or not, would be a good idea at our polling stations. And I would just like to say that I have always had a hard time with, and I had a conversation with Mr. Goff about this last week. It's really difficult to pass legislation and laws on the general public that we otherwise exempt the government and public entities from. It's always been a huge issue for me that we impose laws on the public that we do not have to adhere to ourselves. And so it's always an issue for me to say that the general public can and can't do this, whereas the government can. And I think that that's where the Second Amendment right and the Bill of Rights and our Constitution stems from. And so I've really appreciated this dialogue and the input from our Wheat Ridge Police Department. I think that that's offered a lot of insight. So I would welcome this conversation in the future. And if this is an urgent matter that we need to address before the election, I think that maybe we need to expound on that conversation currently. Thank you.
Mayor, can I clarify that piece, that last part?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Goff.
Yeah, it's what Mr. Dahl was bringing forward tonight was to bring back an ordinance. So we know we can't get an ordinance done before the election, so there's no urgency in that. So Maybe the timing was bad and we shouldn't have brought this tonight the week before the election, but what we've done so far is put up signs that there's no open carry at the rec center and at City Hall for this election. So we do have those signs up, but the ordinance is for the future. So putting it on a study session is fine.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dahl. Mr. Goff, Mr. Dahl will put this on a study session.
Thank you very much. I'll put together a package for you.
Okay, thank you. Do you have anything further?
No, I don't.
Okay, thanks so much. We will go to elected officials matters and start with Mr. Kirkpatrick.
Just to review a couple of basic facts about the election, because you will get questions. It's too late to mail your ballot back now. The deadline was today. However, there are drop boxes, as you know, across the city. The newest one is at Prospect Park. The one at Anderson Park's been there for, I guess, about 6 or 7 months. So we have 4 places that voters can go and get help. The question I often hear is, when is the deadline for me to register to vote? The answer is 7 p.m. on election night. If you are in line at the polls when 7 p.m. rolls around, even if you are not registered to vote yet, you may proceed in line, register on the spot, and vote. Colorado does everything it can to make sure that people get a chance to vote. There are open polling places now, starting with the Taj Mahal, of course, and as Mr. Goff indicated, several across the city. So there are ample opportunities for people to cast their ballots. Please, if anyone asks you, please tell them, do not mail it back at this point. There's too much risk that it won't get to the county clerk and recorder. And if it's not in the clerk and recorder's hands at 7 p.m. on election night, it won't be counted. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kirkpatrick. Well, you see our treasurer, Mr. Miller, is with us. Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have any particular updates for the council this evening. I just want to say good job tonight on passing the 2021 budget ordinance and getting that into place. It's a lot of hard work by the city staff, and really appreciate that. And I think we've got a good budget and an excellent plan for moving into next year. I'm looking forward to the study session that's going to follow and a lively discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. We'll go to elected officials matters and start with Ms. Nosler Beck.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to give a huge shout out to Patrick and Allie, who spent a lot of time walking me through the budget as my first time. I learned a lot through this process, and I'm really proud of the work that the entire staff did and we did as a council. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Ms. Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to let everyone know that we are having another trash bash this Friday from 10 to 11:30 at I-70 in Kipling. So if there are any residents that are available to help us pick up trash in that area on Friday the 30th, that would be wonderful. I plan to be there for a little while. And I also want to thank Jerry DiTullio for organizing this event, as well as others. I think it's really great for our community to come together and clean up trash and address issues that we see in Wheat Ridge. So I want to continue that effort and just thank everybody involved. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Dozeman. Mr. Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have much tonight. I just want to thank everybody who worked on the budget. I think it looks good, and thank you to council. And take care of your neighbors, and if you can find it, buy in Wheat Ridge. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stites. Ms. Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, I have happy news about the goats. The goats are going to be moving to Happiness Gardens. So I have not consulted with that district's council people. So be warned that the goats are going to Happiness Gardens at some point next week. We're still working that out with Ms. O'Donnell at Park and Rec. And I just want to thank everybody in the city who's working hard. We're going to be doing some interpretation with the local elementary, which is right next to there, about restorative ag and why goats would be eating up all of the dying flowers and vegetables at Happiness. So I'll let you know more when I know more. It will not be a goat parade per se. It will be a transfer, but you can certainly go see them once they're at Happiness. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Weaver, and happy travels. Ms. Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a District 2 council person for Happiness Gardens, I welcome the goats and look forward to having them grazing in our district. I won't walk the dogs there, but we'll go visit. So really quickly from me, I just want to again recognize Thrive Builders for their outstanding quality contributions to District 2. It's a beautiful project. And then I want to just remind everybody the Let's Talk Wheat Ridge for the 2 neighborhood engagement processes are ongoing, and they've got meetings this Thursday. I attended the one for Bel Air on Saturday morning. So if you live in either Bel Air or East Wheat Ridge, I highly recommend you participate in Thursday's community gathering. It's online on Zoom. It's a very high quality conversation. It's an opportunity for you to engage with your neighbors and our outstanding city staff in a really high quality conversation about what's important in your neighborhood, what you'd like to see more of, and what you would like to see less of. And so if you need any more information on that, you can go to Let's Talk. Well, you can actually go to whatsupwheatridge.com. It's got like 2 different websites, but there's also Let's Talk Wheat Ridge. So please go. I encourage you to participate. The meetings are from 4 to 5:30 on Zoom. And there's also surveys you can take if you're in those neighborhoods. 10 questions, 5 minutes, and it's really important information for the city staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hulteen. Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to make everybody aware of the severe weather shelter network. It provides shelter for single men, single women, couples living without children, living on the streets in life-threatening winter nights. And that's defined as when overnight temperatures go below 32 degrees or colder and wet, or 20 degrees and colder when it's dry. Anyone that's interested in staying in one of those shelters can go to the Jeffco Human Services in Golden or the Action Center at 14th Street in Lakewood, as well as the Mean Streets Ministry at 13th and Ammons in Lakewood. And that's a registration site. And so you can't do it automatically. It does take a little bit of preparation to enter into the shelter. So if anybody has any questions about that, you can go to swshelternetwork.com.
Thank you, Mr. Urban. Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to repeat what I brought up last week, that I had been contacted by a student at Metro State going for her master's in social work. She is doing her work at Stevens Elementary School, and there they have this area called the Hub, which is a place where there is food, clothing, school supplies. It's open to any student in Wheat Ridge that may need to have some things. What they are asking for are reusable grocery bags and also like winter shoes or boots. And you can call Stevens because of COVID. They don't have people going in and out, and they also are on Facebook. Thank you.
Ms. Hutchinson. Ms. Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to ask Mr. Goff, so we are going to have polling sites set up in City Council chambers on Monday, November 2nd, and then on Tuesday, November 3rd. Our study session on Monday, November 2nd is short-term rentals, which typically has a large number of participants. And so I wonder if we're going to have some sort of notification saying that the part where you can come and participate in person at City Council Hall will not be available for that study session, or how will we get that kind of message out there?
Yes, and maybe Allie can speak to that. I know she's on top of that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hoppy. We'll do a news flash out to our web base. We'll post that on social as well. We'll obviously add it to the website and just make it sort of extra clear that that's not an opportunity at that particular meeting, and provide all the ways obviously there are to get involved, which I think we're learning is providing a nice inclusive environment here for council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hoppy. All right, that almost completes our meeting tonight. I'd like to thank Mr. Gene Meyer with Thrive Home Builders and congratulate them for their award on their project in Wheat Ridge. I have coffee with the mayor coming up at 9 o'clock on November 14th as a Zoom meeting. You can check out the link to that on our city website. That should conclude this meeting. We have a study session that will follow immediately after this meeting. But I'd like to thank all of you who were able to join us tonight, and be well and stay safe and take care of others as you are able. We're going to take a 10-minute break right now and come back at 9:10 to start our study session. So this meeting is adjourned. special study session for the city council for the city of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for October 26, 2020. We took a citizen comment on this meeting before the regular meeting, so we've taken care of that. Our first order of business is Race and Equity Committee application process. And Mr. Goff, I know that we have Ms. Schilling with us, but I will start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we do. Ms. Schilling, I'll turn it over to her and she has a brief update of where we're at. Mary Ann?
Okay. Well, Ms. Schilling, thank you for joining us. Take it away.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. I'm Marianne Schilling, Assistant to the City Manager, and I am here tonight to speak in more detail regarding the Race and Equity Task Force. When this topic was first discussed in September, City Council gave consensus to move forward with the Race and Equity Task Force and provided a few specific directions for staff. The first of which was for staff to return with a draft application for review. This draft was included as part of your council packet this evening. The second was that consensus was received regarding the makeup of the task force, and it was determined to include the following, which was no more than 20 individuals, 2 representatives for each district, with the remainder at large, 4 individuals appointed by the mayor, 1 at large representative per district. And then following the presentation, Wheat Ridge for Equity reached out with additional considerations for City Council to think about regarding the formation of the task force. Those recommendations were emailed to you by Wheat Ridge for Equity, and it was also included as an attachment of our memo this evening. The primary recommendation from this group was to change the design of how the task force was formed. So originally, Council gave direction that they would review the applications without any identifying information. However, Wheat Ridge for Equity is recommending that an evaluation committee is formed, which would include 2 city staff members, 2 elected officials, 1 being a city council representative and 1 being at large, and then 2 members of Wheat Ridge for Equity. The proposed committee would review the applications and would return to City Council at a later date to recommend the appointment of the task force members. So tonight I'm here to ask for consensus regarding the application, as well as direction specifically related to the review process for the Race and Equity Task Force applicants. So at this time, I'm available for any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to questions. Ms. Hoppy.
Thank you, Marianne, for all of your work on this. I like the application and the way you put it up. I would like to say that I'm okay with having a selection committee rather than City Council doing it like at a study session, or I'm okay with it being done through City Council at a study session. I think it's probably more appropriate to have a selection committee. So I just want to say that suggestion has my support. And I think that the application should remain open until we feel like we have kind of filled all of our seats. And so like if we set a deadline, I just want to say human nature, if there's not a deadline, people will put it off. So if we set a deadline and we, don't reach a good number of applicants, then we can always extend the deadline at a later date. One thing that I don't support from the recommendations from the Equity Task Force is the list of like 1 through 20. I don't support that checklist necessarily to be how we would fill everything, how we would fill the positions, but ultimately I think that would be up to either the selection committee or City Council once the applications get filled and moved. But I appreciate the progress that we've made on this, and I appreciate all your work on this, Marianne. Thank you.
All right, additional discussion on this item. Ms. Hulteen and then Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also think that the application that Ms. Schilling put together really matches up with the discussion we had, and I think will really give us good things to look at for the applicant. So I really like the application. you know, we're really fortunate to have an organization in our city like Wheat Ridge for Equity that is organized and engaged, and, you know, talking both with, you know, city staff and city, you know, community members and city council people. I think, you know, the more insight we have in this process, the better we're all going to be at the end of it. So I really appreciate that they're able to, you know, share their thoughts with us. That having been said, I actually felt pretty good about where we ended with our consensus last time. I'm a little hesitant to form a committee to select people for a committee. I think, you know, by having a couple of people appointed per district and then having some at large really allows us that flexibility to make sure that we're able to capture, you know, the best applicants that come through, get a diversity of people, meanwhile making sure that they're representative across the city. So I'd like to continue with the consensus that we reached last time regarding how to actually form the committee. I would be open on the at large if there was a more, you know, dynamic or flexible way of doing that. I would be open maybe to looking at that. But again, forming a committee to select a committee, it just seems kind of cumbersome and would slow down the overall process of moving it forward. And my last question is, it dawned on me reading the packet that Ms. Schilling put together that maybe I want or need a clarification on what we mean by at large. In the packet, at large is referenced, at large members have a connection to the city of Wheat Ridge, indicating that when we say at large, they're not necessarily residents. And my assumption, and I'm realizing perhaps it was an incorrect assumption, when we were talking about at large appointments, it just meant appointments that weren't within the district itself. So I think it would be good to get a clarification on what we mean by at large when we're referencing that. Thank you.
Okay, additional discussion, Ms. Hoppy?
I just wanted to chime in on the at-large. I think that if we do something at-large where they have a connection to the city, or if they're a business owner in the city but don't necessarily live here, we could potentially draw some people with some expertise in the area of what the Race and Equity Committee would be doing. So I think I'm okay with it, with at-large not necessarily having to be a resident.
Mr. Urban, and then Ms. Nosler-Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would agree with Councilmember Hulteen regarding the selection committee. I think that if we were to have a separate selection committee, that would obviously preclude those members of the selection committee from being members of the task force. And I think it's incumbent on us as city council members to take on this role of appointing the members to this task force. I would like it to be in a situation where we have the majority of this coming from residents of Wheat Ridge. I would agree with Councilmember Hoppy that it's not necessarily precluding someone who owns a business here or has a strong connection to the city to participate in this task force, as that would give us a unique perspective. As it relates to the application itself, I do have strong concerns regarding the voluntary information section of the application. It does mention that this is not, that this section is for the limited purpose of assisting in the selection process for the Race and Equity Task Force. And so in that regard, it sort of goes against the next sentence, which says all applicants for the task force shall be reviewed and assessed based on merit. So what of the 7 items in the voluntary section are relating to merit, I guess? My solution here would be, if we're interested in the demographics of the task force, we can provide this as a separate form, unattached, and sent out separately to those that have already applied for the task force, so we can get some basic demographics. But I would hate to see a situation where we have the demographics, the religion, the race, ethnicity, education level of applicants, because regardless of our well intentions, that would be creating a very biased situation that wouldn't be a good first step for a task force regarding inclusion and equity in the city. So And I also have some Title VI concerns regarding this particular section, given that even as a volunteer for the city, this is still, a volunteer is considered an employee, and that would also be a violation of Title VII. So I would make a consensus that we remove this voluntary information section from the application.
Is there,
This meeting is being recorded.
Any thoughts about that?
well, let's see, I have Ms. Nosler back and then Ms. Hobby want to speak. So let's see if we have some discussion on that, okay? Ms. Nosler back?
All right. Real quick, is Jerry still on? Can we just kind of talk through some of the Title VII and Title VI stuff? I'm not super familiar with it, and so
He is on.
He is on. Okay. Mr. Dahl, Ms. Nosler Beck has some questions about Titles 6 and 7, maybe.
Okay, that's gonna be,
Briefly.
that's gonna be tough. I'm no expert in this area, I confess. But hit me, I may have to end up bringing back answers to your questions rather than being able to answer them.
All right.
well, okay. So I think I'm kind of asking a question that Council Member Urban brought up, but the way that I think I want to pose it is, so we are trying to put together this task force, and we are doing our best to make sure that it is a diverse and inclusive process, and that if this is either a committee selecting this or it's the council selecting this task force, we have as much information about the people who are applying so that we can stick to that diversity. That's the intention. But the way that we have this listed, I think, at least when I was looking at the application, I know that we're going into it with that intention, but is it, one, legal? And two, is that how, and maybe that's not a question for you, Jerry, but like, is that how it's perceived to the people that we're trying to have apply?
Well, I will say that what I have learned about this has been helpfully supplied by the task force in, I think it was Aurora. I forget, it was Councilmember Dozman, I think, that put us in touch with them. I'm not quite sure, I can't recall. But in any event, they had looked at putting questions on the materials that would they looked at and rejected, putting questions on the materials that were identify your race, identify your particular category, ethnic or otherwise, that you are, so that we can ensure diversity on the committee. And they moved away from that, and instead, as I recall, made it really pretty neutral and said we have two requirements: that you are eligible to vote, I think, and that you're a resident of the city. Now, there's been discussion here about residents from outside the city, and that's fine too. But what they, I believe, went to was to ask questions about, well, what can you bring? What do you believe you can bring to this committee that would be of help? And where I'm coming from here is, rather than requiring people to make disclosures that you shouldn't be requiring them to make and making decisions based upon those disclosures, they made it as welcoming as possible in the application materials, to not have those kind of objective criteria, but instead welcoming and encouraging people to tell them what you could bring to the committee. And while you can certainly read between the lines, I suppose, and all of us do that when we consider applications, but at least then the information that, I'll quit in a minute, but the information that you receive is not information you've compelled them to disclose as a gatekeeper requirement to be considered. Instead, it's information that they have chosen to disclose and are comfortable disclosing to you. And that, I think, is more defensible. And Aurora, I think, wisely went to that approach. I don't know if that's helpful
Yes.
to your question.
So on the application as it reads now, it does ask for example, your gender identity. And then you can check a box that says that you prefer not to answer. And so is that writing the fine line of like, do they feel compelled just because it's there?
No, I don't think so. You see a lot of choose not to answer options out there in life now. And I think that has progressed to the point where it's as acceptable an answer to say choose not to answer as it is to identify gender or what title you want to be addressed by, Ms., Mrs., Mr., choose not to identify.
So
I think that's all right.
I actually think that Marianne did a really great job on this application in question 6. Like, is there anything else about yourself and or experiences related to race and equity that you'd like to share? And I actually think that's pretty encompassing of the other questions. I mean, I would be okay with removing those questions if we wanted to move forward to just keep it as inclusive as possible. But
Voluntary questions? Ms.
yeah,
Beck?
the voluntary questions.
Thank you. The second question on the application is, what unique experiences, perspective, or expertise would you bring to the task force? So that is an opportunity for people to sort of talk about their background and their expertise and some of that. So that may generate, in addition to the other questions, some information on that topic.
Yep.
Additional discussion. We had Mr. Urban.
Thank you. So I would agree that the open-ended questions that are presented in the application give us enough information to go on as it relates to a person's desire and passion and ambition as it relates to this issue. And I think that any answer that they give to the questions that are posed would be merit-based and would give us more than enough information to decide how they should serve on the committee. I would also suggest, in addition to the removal of the voluntary information section, that we remove the applicant information section from consideration when we're doing the appointments, so that we're looking at the applicants simply on the answers to their questions, and leave it at that, because the blind recruitment process, as it's known in the HR field, allows us to remove any unconscious biases relating to the applicants. It makes it really focused on the merit of the applicant, and it gives us a sort of a clean slate to work off of as we're appointing these applicants to the task force. So I think that would help us be inclusive and ensure that we're not being biased in our appointment to this committee.
Thank you. Ms. Hoppy, I had your hand up here a little bit ago.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I guess I would say I'm indifferent on if we remove the voluntary information or not. I would like to keep just the applicant information on there, because that way, if we're doing district appointments, we can make sure we're verifying that they're in our district. So that's kind of where I stand on the application.
Thank you. Ms. Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I said earlier that the application I was happy with, and rereading it, it dawns on me that question number 5, which says we're looking for task force members to have strong connections with the community in order to expand our outreach efforts. Are you a member of any community or civic organizations, or would be able to contribute in a different way? Please explain. And I think, one of the things we're really endeavoring to do here is hopefully have applicants who aren't necessarily the people we typically hear from, which are a lot of times our community leaders. So I'd like us to consider striking just that first sentence that's specifically saying we're looking for members of the task force to have these qualifications, because if someone feels like they're not qualified enough because they don't have enough community applications, they may self-select out of that. And I think those are exactly the kind of people we want to hear from. So I'd like to propose that we just ask, are you a member of any community or civic organization, or would be able to contribute in a different way? And then that allows people to provide that, and then we can decide if that aligns with the other. I just don't want people to feel like they need to already be involved in order to apply for this. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Hoppy.
I just would like to make a suggestion that when we, in the past, when we are looking for like multiple consensuses, what it's looking like is it's going to be multiple different consensuses on one item. Mr. Urban already asked one, but it didn't really go there. Now Rachel's asking for one. So I think that we should just start checking them off as we go down the list. So I would ask for Mr. Urban to make his consensus again, and for us to ask for that. And then I'd like to ask for Ms. Hulteen to make her consensus again, and then, and we can kind of move forward that way. Because I feel like it keeps the process cleaner.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Urban, would you like to reframe your consensus, and we'll get a show of hands?
Thank you. There's two different consensuses. The first one I would ask is that we remove the voluntary information section from the application.
All those in favor, raise your hand, and we'll ask the clerk. Looks like we've got consensus on that. Very good.
And then the second consensus, based on some of the input that I received, I would ask under the applicant information section that we remove the name and email address in fields from the review process. It would still be within the applicant form itself, but as we're reviewing them, those would be blacked out to reduce the bias involved in the appointment to this task force.
Okay, so all those in favor of that strategy, and it looks like, yes, we have consensus on that. And now Ms. Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a quick question with the consensus that just passed. Would we be able to have the clerk or somebody just certify that the address or the person is in fact in the district? I know I've seen a lot of applications in the last year where people have confused what district they're in. We've had a couple of that. So if we're going to take that route, can we just make sure that when we see those applications, somebody's actually certified the name and the address are within the district?
Yes, we'll certify those.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, I'd like to ask for a consensus on question number 5 to remove the first of the 2 sentences. So we'd be striking the sentence, "We are looking for task force members to have strong connections with the community in order to expand our outreach efforts."
Consensus on that? Okay, we have consensus on that. Are there other tweaks that we would like to make to the document? Ms. Nosler-Beck, and then Mr. Urban.
I don't know if this is necessarily for the document, but I wanted to just go back to the at-large conversation. I do like the idea of expanding that definition to, not just residents, but also business owners. But making sure that we clearly define what the connection is to Wheat Ridge for at-large members. And then also for the committee, I'm okay with not doing a committee as a selection process right now. I also hope that one of the things that the task force is able to do is come up with a better selection process or a way to engage on all of our boards and commissions with everyone throughout the committee. And so I'm hopeful that that's one of the things that we can define through this task force, is how we make it more of an equitable and inclusive process. And I like, just with how this whole study session is working tonight and where we're getting on consensus with things, I'm really confident in what our council is going to be able to do in terms of making sure that we have, a really strong task force with the commitment to equity and diversity. So just wanted to get that out there.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Based on the the question that is now number 5, are you a member of any community or civic organizations, or would you be able to contribute in a different way? Please explain. I think that number 5 is the same question as the check mark question at the top of that same page. So I would ask that we remove that check mark question of, are you a member of one of the following communities? And to expand a little bit further, my main concern about the checkbox question is the checkbox for faith. That comes close to a religious test for participating in a government task force. So I would ask us to remove that and allow them to disclose that in item number 5 or question number 5 if they choose to.
Okay, there's a request to delete the boxes at the top of the second page. Do we have consensus on that?
Can I ask a discussion question about that real fast?
Yes, we may discuss that also.
So kind of for me, I'm okay with having both the boxes and 5 because one gives you a place to just check mark, and then the other one gives you a place to answer essay style. And so maybe it would be appropriate if we just combined them. So are you a member of the following communities? Check all that apply. And then underneath, well, no, because there's, no, 5 also says civic organizations in it, community or civic organization. I'd like to keep them both because I think it's different information you're going to get from both.
Additional discussion on the question Mr. Urban raised and Ms. Hoppy responded to. Ms. Hulteen.
I am curious about, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am curious about Mr. Urban's concerns about the faith test. Is that something that we should be concerned about, or are we confident that that's not going to be an issue?
Is that a legal, looking for a legal opinion there, or?
Legal.
Mr. Dahl, are we treading in constitutional grounds here?
Well, you know, you're asking for information. I think that's well short of some kind of gatekeeper requirement that you be or not be affiliated with a faith to be able to further participate. You're asking for information. That by itself doesn't raise a concern for me. I think probably what Mr. Urban, I don't mean to speak for him, but what might be his concern is, it's true, it's not a gatekeeper question, keeping people in or out, but it's sort of how that information is used. And perhaps, but that's kind of one level moved, and maybe it would be useful to have a little discussion. Sometimes you test whether you need information by asking, well, what would we do with it if we got it?
Yeah.
And if you emerge from that discussion saying, I'm not sure we'd use that or want to use that, then that tells you a lot about whether you should bother to have the information.
I don't think it's that helpful. I think the narrative question is more helpful because they'll actually say, if they want to, I'm a member of the Catholic Church, or I work for this business. I mean, just checking a box isn't going to give us any information. It's not going to be very helpful.
Ms. Weaver.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Urban on this one, and Mr. Goff. I don't think we haven't asked that on a census since the 1950s, and it's a really trapping question. And if people want to write about it in the open-ended question, they certainly can. But I don't think we should have a checkbox for. I wouldn't share that information because groups have been pulled out for centuries, if not more than that.
Okay, then Mr. Urban, did you have any response to?
Yeah, just kind of in my review and in my non-law degree review of Title VII as it relates to the employment law, it indicates that when we're asking questions about anything on an application, whether it be for a volunteer or an employee, they should be really focused on a bona fide occupational qualification. And I don't feel like an association or a faith of any kind would be a bona fide occupational qualifications. So that's generally my reason for wanting to exclude that. Obviously, they can disclose whatever they want to, but when we ask them, "Are you a member of a faith or not?" that doesn't seem to be a very government-oriented question.
Ms. Hoppy.
I must have been misunderstood Mr. Urban's consensus then. I thought he was wanting to remove the entire question in entirety, but it sounds like he's just wanting to remove the faith box. Is that true?
I could go either way. I feel like number 5 answers the same. We're getting the same information from number 5 as we would from the check boxes altogether. But if I can't have the whole thing removed, then I would just ask us to remove the faith box from that, because technically most faiths are also a nonprofit.
Ms. Nosler-Beck.
I would just like to say that in terms of the application, I think I'm in favor of removing all of the kind of open-ended questions. I think we could we're going to be removing the voluntary information and then removing the check boxes, and it allows a space for the applicant to just disclose whatever information they're comfortable with disclosing. And I like the idea of removing those.
Ms. Schilling.
Thank you. This is all really good feedback. One thing that I'd like to share is that having received several applications for the Sustainability Committee and Wheat Ridge 101, what we're finding is that people are writing one sentence, maybe two. So if you're looking for additional information, we can put in there, like, we're expecting kind of a larger response, or if there's anything that you'd like to suggest. But just to caution you all that if you're expecting them to share a lot of information, that may not happen.
All right, Mr. Urban asked for a consensus on whether to eliminate the boxes. And I guess that's all the boxes. How do we feel about that? Do we have consensus on that? We do have consensus on that. So we'll eliminate the boxes.
So we have a question about selection committee. Do you want to form a selection committee or let city council make the selection?
I have a question on that.
Okay, Mr. Urban.
So let's not be optimistic here and suggest that we only have 19 applicants. Would we then appoint everybody who applied, or would there be a situation where we appoint less than that?
That's totally up to you guys. I think the suggestion from Wheat Ridge Equity was that we appoint a 20-member committee. And work at it until you get 20 members filling those categories. But city council's consensus was 20 also, but broken down by district and at large. So,
Ms. Hoppy.
Okay, so I would like to make a consensus that we make the committee from anywhere from 12 to 20, and that the way we get to the 12 would be 1 for each district that's district designated, 1 from each district that is an at-large, and 4 from the mayor. That's 12, right? And then if we have more than, if we want to fill the seats more, then we just consider all of those actual at-large positions.
Okay, so there is an effort to get a consensus. Do we have consensus on that mathematics?
I have a question.
Or a question on that, Mr. Urban?
So would that be appointment by city council or by the selection committee?
Well, so I was just trying to get our numbers set first, and then I was gonna try to find a consensus on, does that go from city council or by committee? But from taking notes during discussion, we don't have anyone who has said affirmative that they want a selection committee. We have me, who's questionable, and then 3 others who have said that they don't want a selection committee. So I'm just trying to answer the question of how many people and how do we get there, between 12, how do we get between 12 and 20, and how do we make sure each district is represented equally on that? And then I was going to ask a question about the selection committee or city councils.
Patrick?
Sorry, I just want to make sure I understand it and the rest of the council understands that process. So if we have an open application process, let's say we get 50 applications, how are those going to be broken down then? Like, I mean, so all district, we give all
So
district.
each district gets one district designated representative. So someone from District 1. The city councilors get to pick that district designation. And then the rest of them would be oh yeah, I know, because we're talking about it's muddy. Selection committee and who selects is muddy. You're right. Sorry, Patrick. Let me think about that for a second.
Okay, Ms. Hutchinson?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just wondering about definition of strong connection to the community. This is about Wheat Ridge. And so I don't know what strong connection means, that somebody drives through Wheat Ridge, they ride their bike through Wheat Ridge, they're a business owner or a property owner. This is about Wheat Ridge. Just have it where the people are from Wheat Ridge on this committee to make decisions about the people who live here. I know with other committees that we have, people are coming in from other places, and the deal is they're making decisions for the people who live here. So this is a situation about what's going on in Wheat Ridge. Why can't we just have it for the people who live in Wheat Ridge making the decisions? And that would kind of tone down maybe 50 applications. I'm just throwing that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think one of the reasons why we decided at large might be a benefit was considering things like representative from one of our schools, where this is very much a community interface issue. So I think, the question of, I'm hesitant. I had thought at large just meant from like the whole pool, not necessarily specifically saying we want X number of people who are not necessarily residents. So I hope we get applications from people who have associations with the schools. I think we have business owners and people, the minister in my community, she might be wonderful. So I think we'd be limiting ourselves if we were only open to residents, but so I'm open to the committee, including non-residents. I'd like to maybe suggest a slight modification that I think Janice is working on also. I see she's got her math face on. So I think the 2 appointees per district is really helpful. I think we're going to have a lot of really high quality applicants come through. And so I think 2 appointees per district gets us to 8. And then 4 at large from the mayor gets us to 12. And if we have additional applications beyond that and they're qualified, then I think it could go back to the city councilors to each pick one more from their district. And that would get us to 16, which is a really great number. And I'm okay with being a little bit flexible, but I think if we each get 2 per district, 4 at large by the mayor, and if we have additional applications, they can go back to the city council members. I don't know if that works logistically. Patrick's waving wildly.
Well, again, I'm sorry, I'm getting into the weeds, but that's important. So we get all the applications, we split them up by district and give them to the council members. What does the mayor get to choose from? I mean,
Go on.
The at large.
Were you asking?
Yes.
So I was thinking the counselors pick, and then the remaining pool is.
Then the mayor gets the remaining pool.
And the mayor gets everyone else. So that to me is that kind of at large idea that they could be from anywhere in the city. They could.
Okay. Ms. Hoppy.
Okay, I'm gonna try a consensus. I would like to move forward to consensus that city council performs the selection, and that we are looking for 12 to 20 people, and our minimum number being 12 breaks down that like this. Each district picks 2 people, 1 at large and 1 district specific person. It could also be 2 district people. Your at large could also be a district specific if you want, but at least 1 that's specific to your district, 1 at large, and the mayor picks 4 at large. That gets us to 12. And then the remaining applicants, if we have more than 12, when we're doing the selection process, the remaining applicants, we can discuss as a council team on if we want to go more than 12 at the time, or if we want to stay at 12.
Okay, discussion on that idea. Mr. Stites?
Yeah, I like that idea. I think that the remaining could be kind of picked at large up to 20 as we go. I do have a question that if council, I think that Wheat Ridge for Equity kind of gave if there's a vacancy that they would fill it as far as the council goes. What if the city council appoints this and there's vacancies? Do we just go through this process again to fill those? Yeah, okay.
We can't get our seats filled, then we can extend the deadline if we would like to extend the deadline and do
What
a
if
bigger
there's a
information.
vacancy 6 months down the way?
I think whatever district it was in, whatever district appointed that person fills that seat.
Okay.
Or the mayor, if it was the mayor.
Got it. Okay.
Mr. Urban?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So when we talk about the at-large, I understand that we have this sort of the ability for them to be either residents or non-residents, but what I guess I would like to make sure is we have a backstop so that we have a majority of task force members being residents of the city, regardless of the number of at-large that we end up having. I just want to make sure that at the end of the day, regardless, we have a majority of that number, whatever that ends up being, be residents of the city.
Can Councilmember Urban, can you make that a separate consensus?
Yeah.
Once we
Yeah.
move it? Thank you. So I'm going to ask for consensus that City Council is the selection committee, and through the process that I described, which is each district gets 2 appointees, 1 at large, 1 district specific. The mayor then gets 4 at large appointees, and we will discuss what at large means and how far it goes in a different consensus.
And a question on that, the 2 counselors from each district would coordinate with how they come up with their members. Thank you. Okay, show of hands for Ms. Hoppy's consensus. Okay, looks like we've got consensus there. What other questions do we need to answer on this item? Mr. Urban?
Thank you. I'd like to make a consensus that the majority of the members of the task force be residents of the city of Wheat Ridge.
Okay, discussion on that before we ask for a show of hands. Don't see any discussion. Is that a show of hands or a question, Ms. Hoppy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Urban, are you thinking just general majority? So if we have 16, we end up with 16 at the end, then we just want to make sure that more than half of those are Wheat Ridge residents or
1%, yeah, so 9.
Sure. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Okay, let's see a show of hands on that. Okay, thank you. Ms. Hutchinson brought up the connection to Wheat Ridge, and I'd like to hope that we have a very strong nexus to relationship in our community, whether you're a resident or whether you're a business owner or operator in our city or employed full-time in our city, and those types of connections, so that we sort of ground it in our community. Additional discussion, Ms. Hulteen.
Thank you. I have one more thing that I'd like to get clarified. In the memo that we have here, it says that In the overview, it says the city of Wheat Ridge seeks applicants to serve on a task force focused on advancing racial equity. The task force will be advisory to the city council through February 2020 or as extended by city council. But the consensus that we reached was that it was a 1-year charter for the task force. And our consensus specifically said to have a report by September 30th, 2021. I think that's probably too fast for them to bring us something quality, but I think I'd like to stick with the 1-year charter with, encourage, or it could be that they continue to work for a year, but our consensus was for them to bring forward recommendations. It says a year, but then it says September 30th. So a year from formation. And I'd welcome discussion on that, but whatever it is, I just want to be really clear. I would like them to continue and self-sustain. I think the sustainability committee is a great model, and I would absolutely support anything beyond that. But I'd also like the city to have something to work with so we can start implementing policies.
Okay, discussion on that item, Mr. Urban?
I would agree that being expeditious with this is not going to hurt the quality of the work being done on the task force. And I think that giving them a short leash on this and making sure that we work through the issues that are present and concerning to us, that by putting it out to February 2022, that gives it kind of a long walk. And I'd really like it to be as quick as possible. And if we need to extend it beyond 1 year, then that's fine. But I think it's important to give the applicants an understanding of their time commitment, and it would, I think, reduce the likelihood of someone agreeing to a 2-year term. I know as city council members, when we signed up to run for office, 4 years is a long time to commit to something. So I think to be reasonable to citizens to say we're asking to commit to a 1-year time frame is, I think, reasonable.
And that's what the application does say, 1 year.
Yeah, Ms. Hoppy?
I think just the application on the overview of it does say February 2022, or it's extended by city council. And my guess is just that was the thought of that's how long it's going to take to get it started. Is it'll start in February 2021 and it'll go until February 2022. But so I'm okay with that date staying on the overview. But really what we could just say is within 1 year of formation of the task force will bring back recommendations to city council. And they will know when they come back with their recommendations, they will know if they're asking to be in for the long haul for longer, or if they're saying, and we're done. So I think maybe we just change that to 1 year. So I'm gonna ask for consensus that we change that language. We take the exact date out of it and we change the language to within 1 year of formation of the task force.
They do what? Come back with a report, was your consensus?
Come back with recommendations to city council.
Okay, that sounds like we have consensus. We also talk about about the task force, the members will be expected to serve for at least 1 year. Is that consistent with that concept? Okay. Additional discussion, direction? Ms. Nosler-Beck.
I realized that we, didn't hit everything that was asked for in the memo with Wheat Ridge for Equity. And one of those was the committee for the selection. And I would like to, I don't know if it's possible to do this, but with the task force, if there's a way to add some language that they address boards and commissions and also the application process for this committee and selection committees and how that works. Just to see if, that can help address how we move forward with whatever the task force might become or help with some of our other commissions.
Can I ask?
Yeah, Mr. Goff.
Are you asking that this that this task force provides recommendations to make sure that our boards and commissions are more inclusive?
Yeah, well, like, because this is a task force, so it's different from our other boards and commissions. But one of the recommendations of the task force might be that we need to make this a board or a commission or something, or formalize it. And if that's the case, then maybe we want to have a different kind of selection process. Maybe they decide that they don't want a task force, and we know that we need some refinements in our boards and commissions applications process. And so maybe that's not something to actually put in what we're trying to get out of the task force, but I guess maybe I just want that to be one of the outcomes. I don't know.
Just so you know, we are working on that internally. Denitza is looking at the application process and is going to come back to council with a new application for boards and commissions and process.
Okay.
If
Ms.
that's,
Hoppy, did you have something to add to that?
I just wanted to say that I think that it's absolutely within the wheelhouse of what we're hoping the task force will do, what Councilwoman Nosler-Beck is asking for. And I don't think it's something that we need to necessarily memorialize in a consensus on the application itself. And I think that, we have Marianne here, who is a part of this discussion, and she'll most likely be doing a lot of this work. And so I think that she can probably carry forward that voice for you to the task force.
Thank you. Ms. Hulteen?
Thank you. I have what I believe is a quick last question from me. I think this is obvious and hopefully it goes without saying, but I just want to confirm that we will have access to translation if we get applications that come through in Spanish or other languages, that those will be translated.
Yes, we will have that available.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Because my Spanish is flagging a little bit, I'll be honest with you. Okay, have we concluded the discussion, Ms. Schilling and Mr. Goff? Have we covered the elements that you think are necessary to move this to the next level?
are you okay with us? It's been a pretty detailed discussion. We can make these changes to the application and just implement it, or do you want to see anything come back or just proceed?
I'd like to make a consensus that staff makes the changes to the application and please proceed.
Show of hands. Okay, looks like you've got the thumbs up for that, at least one. Okay, any more discussion on this item? Thank you very much, Ms. Schilling, for a good job. And thanks for a good discussion on this. I'm looking forward to seeing this task force implemented and getting their work on in our community. That takes care of item number one. We'll go to item number two, staff reports. Mr. Goff.
Nothing else this evening. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, we've got elected officials reports. Ms. Nosler-Beck, would you like me to start with you and go through the list? Or should we just say, is there anybody that has something to contribute? Put your hand up.
Do I get to decide?
It was a long-winded way to say that I think we've concluded successfully this study session. Thank you very much. If there's no more business to come before us.
I did want to say one thing.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to say really quick. I'm so grateful, Marianne. This was incredible work. And it's really hard to put that. We know how much you put into this, and then we all sit up here and pick it apart. And I just know that you gave us some really great stuff to react to, and we had we're just so grateful for everything that you do. So thank you so much. And I also want to give a shout out to Wheat Ridge for Equity for submitting the memo and being a part of this process with us and advocating for what they were hopeful for, and I think we got to a good place. And I want to just remind folks of some of the people who came and spoke to us during our last study session where we talked about this task force. And remember that it's people and residents stepping out of their comfort zone to make real change. And I just really appreciate everybody on council, everybody in the community coming on this journey, because it's hard work, but it's really good work. So thank you.
Thank you. I didn't mean to cut off any conversation. Any more elected officials matters that you want to bring to our citizens? I'm happy to keep our meeting going. Okay, well, it looks like we don't have any more business to come before us, so we will adjourn this meeting. We'll be back in, I think next week at a study session, right? Is that?
Yes, sir.
I've got it. Okay. So anyway, be careful out there. It's the roads may be slippery. We've got the kids going to school, so be careful with that. It's darker earlier, and be very careful around Halloween. It's always a tricky time of the year. So thank you very much, and we'll see everyone later. Take care.